From Hamilton Place Strategies in Washington, D.C., this is the HPS Insights Podcast.
Welcome to HPS Insights. It's a podcast from Hamilton Place Strategies, analyzing current events impacting business and political communities. I'm your host, Tony Fratto, founder and partner of Hamilton Place Strategies. And I have to tell you, I'm so thrilled today to host Anna Gifty, Opoku-Agyeman, who is my friend and researcher, writer, science communicator, activist, co-founder of the amazing Sadie Collective, and now today, and what I'm really excited to talk about it most recently, is the editor of a brand new book that's coming out on February 1st, The Black Agenda, Bold Solutions for a Broken System. And I'm just so excited to be able to talk to Anna, to be able to talk to you about it and to welcome you here today and to share your insights on the importance of this. I'm not even through the entire book because, one of the things I love about the book, let's just note that it's you'll be able to buy it. I'm going to say this a few times on this podcast. You buy it at Amazon and other online retailers and lots of other places. It's up by St. Martin's Press, but one of the things I love about it is the range of topics. And that they're all essays. And so what I love about books of essays like that is I could pick around. I don't have to go from beginning to end. But Anna, welcome and thank you. Tell me the story behind putting this book together and what the inspiration was. And then I want to dive into lots of pieces of it.
Yes. Thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you for having me. You're such a dear friend. I'm such a huge fan of HPS. And so I appreciate you just having me on the podcast today. Yeah, the story of this coming together is pretty organic, actually. So as you all know, I'm a young researcher, specifically a Black woman. And so around the time when the pandemic started, there was a lot of news that was going on around racial disparities. And the conversation was really being had over Twitter and less so in the mainstream media. And so I, as someone who's a consumer of news and consumer of political news, was kind of confused why the Black voices that were being sort of, in conversation on my Twitter timeline were not necessarily being reflected in the mainstream. And so I said, I wonder if it's because people don't know where to look or they're just straight up ignoring Black experts. But one thing that really caught my eye was that I was looking at a major news outlet and they have an op-ed section that they regularly have guest contributors to, and they have a popular column. And I think you can guess what that mainstream media is. And so essentially, I did a quick snap analysis and I said, okay, let me look at sort of the essays that mentioned economists over the last month, which was at that point, March 2020, and see how many of those economists are Black. They cited about 42 economists, none of them were Black. And I thought that was really significant. And so if you think about the fact that we knew that COVID was going to disproportionately affect Black communities at the time, and that it was already raising the unemployment rate for Black American groups and other marginalized groups, it's actually very confusing as to why those voices were left out of the discourse. And so essentially around that time, I actually ended up getting signed by my wonderful agent, Leela Kimboli. And so I kind of tossed an idea to her, what if we just put all these Black experts in a book? Would that sell? And she was like, Anna, that's brilliant. So basically over the course of 2 or 3 months, we fleshed out this idea of the Black Agenda, and we put together a proposal that we then pitched only to the big 5 publishers, and it happily landed with one of them, Macmillan, which their imprint, St. Martin's, is who's publishing the book today. The other thing that also contributed to me bringing something like this together is that I'm actually quite visible for someone who is a Black person in economics. And it's interesting because I'm actually just starting my career. The reason why a lot of people know my work is because of the Sadie Collective and the op-eds that I've written in the past. And so I noticed that a lot of news outlets were coming to me for comments on the economy and how it intersects with racial identity, even though there are Black economists who have been doing this work for decades. And so I thought to myself, what if we put something together in which we honored Black economists and policy wonks, and that later developed and evolved into something that became more encompassing of different areas of expertise, as the book has shown you today.
Yeah, it certainly has. I mean, and you're right. So I mean, that my background in economics, and I'm watching, CNBC every day,
right.
and I sort of noticed this also, as this was as attention to Black voices was growing in 2020 in the wake of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. And, there were, news organizations and others who started looking for some new voices. Our friend Lisa Cook was one of them. Absolutely. Who I started seeing regularly on CNBC, which was great. And my old colleague from Treasury Department, Nada Essa, who's at Georgetown, would start doing some. And so I was proud of the CNBC was started looking and finding, and hopefully that's something that continues. But the first thing I thought of when I saw your book was, again, it's not just economics, it's a range of public policy areas: education, healthcare, climate, technology, wellness, criminal justice reform, voting. There's it's packed with experts in those. And the first thing I thought of was, this isn't just a book of essays. Like, the viewpoints on it are really important, but it's a resource it should go to producers everywhere. Like, this, you're looking for the book. Here's your book. When that issue comes up, and like, this is like, here's a starting place for you to find find the experts. And you think it'd be able, they'd be able to find them on their own, but it's like, whatever. Let's not think about why they can't. Let's provide the solution to them. And I think that's what you've done.
Right. That's exactly right. The story I love to tell people about this is, so I was blessed to be invited to Marketplace. And the funny story around that is that when they invited me to be on the show, I had no idea I was talking to that Marketplace. So I had gotten an email that was like, oh, Marketplace wants to talk. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know who these people are, but I'm happy to talk to them. And so I actually was speaking to Kai Rizendahl, and I had no idea that it was the Marketplace associated with NPR. And so he had said something like, man, you got a lot of work ahead of you. And I'm like, no, we do. Like, we both have a lot of work ahead of us. Yeah. Not knowing that I was correcting someone basically on air. I had no idea about that. But he took to that and he was very excited about it. But ultimately, at the end of that interview, they then said, so, we would love to feature more Black folks. Who should we go to next? And the people that I mentioned are folks you've heard on Marketplace. So Janelle Jones was one of the individuals I mentioned. I said, look, she has this idea called Black Who Invest. I love it. It's such an interesting way of thinking about public policy in the economy. And I think there needs to be more coverage on it. I'd also mentioned Benga Ajilore, who's also in the book. He talked about sort of, the rural South, specifically the Black Belt, and sort of talking about how the economic issues there overlap with the other sections of the book. And I think I had mentioned one other person that is not coming to mind at the moment, but I mentioned all these Black experts and I said, here's some names. Let me know if, any of them resonate. Turns out they had invited all of those individuals in later episodes. And I think for me, that was like very affirming, like, wait a minute, people listen to what I say. So like this book is really going to be a great resource. And even just bringing it onto certain people's radar, as you mentioned, I think folks in the media are going to find this as a really helpful resource moving forward, especially since, since the wake of the summer 2020 protests, people really do want to center Black voices more so. Obviously, I would say that's a little bit short-lived, as empirical evidence has shown, but my hope is that a book like this will sort of revive that interest and really have some concrete names that can get pushed out into the mainstream in the public discourse.
I have so many questions for you on that. I mean, one of them is just of context for these voices, and for you also as a Black woman and a scholar and voice on so many of these things, is the sort of tension, right? It's like, so I look at all of these names and I read a lot of their work, and some I knew of their scholarship before the book, is just that, they are Black experts. They're also Black experts on the Black experience in those sectors, but they're also experts, period. Right. So, so I always think of the tension. We absolutely want, so for example, we want Dr. Marshall Shepard talking about the
climate weather gap. Yeah.
Right. The climate racial gap, which is, it's really, it's very interesting. It needs attention. We know that this is about climate change impacting, disproportionately Black communities. But he's also a climate expert, right? Right. Just broader, just not just on the question of, but I always think of that question I have for you is just on this tension of, we want these experts coming on and talking about how these really big issues are impacting the Black community, because the impact in many cases, I think in all the cases in this book, are in fact disproportionately impacting the Black community. But they're also experts that go beyond just how it impacts the Black community. And so just how to think about it, think about them that way as they emerge as growing voices.
Yeah, I really love this question. I always say that there's a difference between studying racial inequality and living through it. And in Black experts, you actually have individuals who can carry both, right? They have that lived experience that further contextualizes the questions that they ask about the world. And I think that those are the experts that should really be leading the charge on a lot of these issues, because they understand how the worst outcome of these issues impacts the most vulnerable. And they have literally thought about the solutions and how we address that moving forward. And so to your point, that's exactly the way the book is constructed. I've constructed it in different sections to show people it's not just Black people are experts on Black issues. They're experts on these big topics that we've been talking about for the last 5, 6, 10 years or so. And so it's really important that when you want to bring in a climate expert, you're considering some of these names moving forward, because these individuals are experts first and foremost in their own line of expertise, be it climate, healthcare, wellness, whatever. And then they're Black, right? And so their Blackness, as it intersects with their expertise, then gives you sort of this fuller picture of what does it mean to study your own lived experience within the context of this sort of policy issue, right? So what I love about the climate chapter, you brought that up, is that you're hearing from, I believe, 5 experts. And what I love about the way it's constructed, and that was accidental, by the way, just like sometimes you put things together, you're like, oh, wait, that worked out really great. Right. It starts off really big with Dr. Marshall Shepard's essay talking about the climate weather gap. What's going on? We already know about this from the science. He says, well, let's take the science and bring it down to the policy level. Hurricane Katrina was essentially our preview into how climate change was going to affect Black and brown communities. And he was saying this, back in like 2006, right? And so he's citing the evidence that he's been able to construct. And that then trickles down into sort of what's happening with the climate justice movement. And that's where you hear some of the younger voices saying, we need to do better with centering Black voices in those spaces. And so I think for me, I look at this book as a way to make a case for why Black experts are not just experts on race talk or race topics, as Dr. Tressie McMillan Cottom talks about in her foreword, but rather they are experts on particular issues with a deeper understanding of how it affects the Black community.
It's perfect. And I think it's such an important context. I want to take a break, and we'll come back and talk about maybe a couple sections of the book, and some of the things that maybe surprised us. I'll tell you something that I learned, a specific one thing I learned in the book. But we'll come back after this break. You're listening to the HPS Insights podcast. We have the editor of Black Agenda, Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman, with us today, and we'll be back right after this.
Economics has a diversity problem. The Sadie Collective is the first and only organization dedicated to addressing the pipeline and pathway problems for Black women in economics, finance, data science, and public policy. Named after the first African American to earn a PhD in economics, the Sadie Collective seeks to support and inspire the next generation of Black women in these career fields. To learn more about the collective and how you can get involved, email sadiecollective@hamiltonps.com or visit sadiecollective.org.
We're back on HPS Insights. I'm Tony Fratto. We have Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman with us, talking about her book, The Black Agenda, book of amazing Black experts on all of the big issues of the day. And Anna, honestly, I actually have not gotten to everything, to every section in the book. I skipped a couple parts of it, and some I was able to get in deeper on. And because there is so much thinking, I'm a fast reader, but there's so much to think about in it that I end up going back and rereading parts of it. Something honestly, I'm a little embarrassed about is something I never heard before. Was in I think it was Monica McLemore's section. I had never heard of the Flexner report.
Me neither.
So I'm not alone. Honestly, I
Yeah.
never heard of this before, and the impact it's had on. This is a section on healthcare and about inequities in health professionals and diversifying the health delivery, health workforce in America.
Yeah.
And I never heard of the impact that this report, which ostensibly, as I understand it, was about trying to improve the quality of healthcare in America, but had this outrageous consequence of essentially pulling the rug out from education, health professional education in Black communities, and it was shocking. And when people talk about the sort of structural racism, to me is one of those just like really important examples that had an incredible impact in the 20th century America of not just like the health outcomes for Blacks and Black communities, but also their economic opportunity. Also, because as we know, in the 20th century, it's one of the most well compensated, and it's a path to affluence is education, and especially education in the health sciences, where people pay a premium for those services. You can do really well. So it just had this enormous impacts, and it was this report that I'd never heard of in my entire life.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that. That's one of the statistics that really shocked me in the book. To kind of give people context around just how much was lost. Essentially, this report was constructed to, as you mentioned, kind of improve healthcare quality. But what it ended up doing was actually cementing healthcare hierarchy. So as you all know, right, there's the doctors and there's the nurses, right? That hierarchy really came out of this report. And so what Dr. McLemore talks about is the fact that this simultaneously created a hierarchy within the medical and healthcare profession, while also being used as a measure to eliminate schools that weren't essentially abiding by that hierarchy. And so what that led to was the closing of multiple minority serving and Black serving institutions that, if we actually were to do the math, according to Dr. McLemore, we would have had 200,000 more Black physicians today had those schools not closed. And when you think about that, that's insane. Right? It's really crazy, because we're living right now in a time where we know COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting Black communities. Imagine if we had 200,000 more Black physicians. We already know that Black physicians already will serve their own communities at a higher rate than other races. And so we're losing out on not just individuals who can get more economic opportunity out of being physicians in an entire generation that would have been influenced by that, but we're also losing out on quality healthcare, right? Like, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that Black patients are maltreated or mistreated rather in the healthcare space. And so I think even Dr. Tressie McMillan Cotton has a episode with Red Table Talk with Jada Smith and her daughter and her mother, right? Where she talks about how Black men in particular, this is something you see later on in the wellness chapters, are treated in a way that sort of dehumanizes them, especially if you think about color, right? Like the color of someone's skin or how dark they are. That also impacts how maternal infant health is administered. And so I think that the Flexner report is like the ramifications of the Flexner report is something that I have never heard before. And I'm really excited for other people to hear about it as well. And hopefully we can find some actual solutions to sort of diversifying the healthcare force. I believe that Dr. McLemore talks about the fact that we need to touch base at HBCUs. HBCUs are catalysts for kind of creating this new like generation of Black physicians and Black healthcare workers. But more importantly, we need to make sure that the resources that we're giving to these different healthcare professions are not just being concentrated amongst those who are in medicine, because nurses, as we know, and Dr. McLemore is a nursing researcher and a nurse, are very much the backbone of the healthcare system. Yeah,
and we've sort of, in fact, in both cases, and look, I'm very, very pro immigration, as you know, and but we've essentially tried to solve that problem through immigration. So we import amazingly talented doctors from the subcontinent, India and Pakistan and the Middle East and elsewhere, nurses from everywhere, including especially from Africa and Latin America. I always want more immigrants. So it's good, but it is in fact true that I don't know. There have been enough things done to the Black and minority communities in America that I don't know whether the Flexner report, for example, was done with malintent or not. I just don't know. I just learned about it, so I don't know enough about it to know for sure. But it is one of those things that is just, it was, to me, it wasn't that the identification of, if these were substandard institutions that were in Black communities, there wasn't the effort, which I think she talks about. And when she talks about her third recommendation of investment in those communities, right? It was, the response wasn't to try to improve them. It was to shut them down. It wasn't, well, we need to direct more resources and try to elevate, if that's in fact the case. It wasn't, to me, it was more the response to it, even than the report itself, when clearly what should have been done was to direct more resources and help and to, elevate health outcomes and health talent, So I don't know whether it was the intention, but certainly the consequence was just devastating.
Yeah. I think according to Dr. McLemore's essay, she talks a little bit about the context of the time, right? It was 1910. Yeah. So we can assume a couple things about, how people were feeling towards Black and brown folks at the time. But that being said, again, the consequences are detrimental. We're still feeling it today. And so her solutions are very much targeted at how do we sort of reverse the effects of the Flexner report and how it impacted Black communities for the long term.
Yeah. What about there's a lot in there, both in the economic and technology sections on future of work. How that impacts, especially in the Black communities. Can you tell me what some of your thoughts on those areas too?
Yeah, so it's very interesting you asked me this because my research interest as a PhD student is on the future of work. And so I was really happy to include some of these thoughts in the book. And so one of the first essays that really gets at this is Dr. Kristen Brody's essay, where she talks about how the future of work depends on HBCUs. For those who don't know what HBCUs are, historically Black colleges and universities. They're also the top producer of college graduates who identify as Black. And so think about that, right? Like if the Black workforce plays a substantial role in the labor force, then it's really important that HBCUs be funded with everything that they need to ensure that workforce that's coming out of those institutions are as equipped as possible to then make a significant impact on our labor force and therefore our economy. So I think her solutions are really targeted at how do we prepare students in the classroom for the work that's coming and the next few decades, where it's going to be heavily technological, heavily dependent on coding, heavily dependent on big data. But she also talks about how these larger structural investments in the actual institutions themselves are absolutely necessary to propel this forward. And so I really, really love her essays. Like one of my favorite essays in the book, mainly because I'm a really good friend with her. But the other thing too is that she makes a really great case for an institution that already exists. It's really about like throwing more money at it and making sure that money is invested right into the students and developing them to be the future leaders of tomorrow. I would say the technology section also gets at this. So Dr. Brandeis Marshall's essay, she's actually going to be part of a virtual event with the Urban Institute on February 11th. So feel free to tune in if you'd like. But essentially, she talks about how Black folks actually have to be prepared for what's coming in the future. And so she says, it's not enough to just be, familiar with how to use a computer or familiar how to access the internet. You have to understand sort of how these algorithms are constructed. You have to have some level of digital smarts when it comes to approaching the digital space. And so similar to street smarts, similar to book smarts, you have to be prepared for the digital age that we're entering. And so her essay, in my opinion, is actually targeting the Black community. She's talking directly to the Black community and saying, here's what we need to do next. And so I really loved her essay as well, because it was a interesting perspective of how to sort of get at this future of work phenomenon that seems inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was just really enlightening. I mean, and just a really cool perspective on how, like, again, it's a practical response, right? Like there's a lot of, but people throw around lots of discussions about, sort of theoretical kinds of things. Like she's given like very, very practical advice on how to deal with the world that's coming in front of us. And I just thought that was really, really terrific. That was, you remember, I mean, like the future of work piece of this, and part of what this book is, like this book is about, identifying the pipelines of, it's about a lot of things, but identifying the pipeline of these experts for others to take notice of them and see them and find them and to be able to access their knowledge and guidance and judgment. But I remember when we were working on something together at the time with related to Sadie Collective last summer, when the CEO of Wells Fargo was asked about the lack of Black bank blacks in the banking sector, whether as economists or traders or whatever. And he gave an answer that was sort of a shrugging that, the pipeline isn't there for it. And so, but no recognition that he has some obligation to try to fill the pipeline. So one of the things I love about Sadie is that it is about filling that pipeline of, answering that question with action and giving lots of other people the opportunity to play a role in helping to fill the pipeline too. And I think that is a future of work thing. I mean, those are sort of the practical kinds of things that people can be doing to try to make sure that that pipeline is filled with the very best from every corner of the country to do great things.
100%. I love that you alluded to that. Because once again, I mean, you're just hitting these questions on the head. That's my research interest. So I'm very much interested in thinking about how are we going to usher the next generation of Black and Brown people into the workforce successfully. And there's different barriers that arise along that pathway that, quite frankly, haven't been empirically studied to the point where, people are citing this data as a reason as to why we are doing it a specific way. I will say that there's a lot of literature in the organizational behavior space that gets at this, but I would argue that there needs to be more data analysis around these topics because they are very serious, right? If you think about, who's going to have jobs, right? There's an entire continent, Africa, for example, has the youngest population in the world. No one is talking about that, but it's incredibly important because in about 10 years, they're all going to be at least 25 and be part of the working force. And so we have to find a way to make sure that they actually enter the workforce in a way that doesn't disrupt the entire labor market. And so for me, that's incredibly true. And I think on a more practical level, this book is sort of paying homage to that, right? It's saying there's no shortage of Black folks who can speak to different issues, but it's really about your intentionality as an institution, as someone with power. Are you going to empower those individuals to then have a voice in your particular space or in your particular institution? And so for me, hearing those comments from the CEO of Wells Fargo, I just thought it was very lazy, right? It's like
it sounded lazy.
Yeah, it's like you're saying there's no Black talent, but you also don't recruit at more than 1 or 2 HBCUs, and there's hundreds across the nation. You're not trying, right? So it's not like these students don't want to do that. There's no shortage of individuals that I know in my own personal communities that are Black and are interested in Wall Street. No shortage. People are trading stocks and interested in the trading floor, but it's really about presenting folks with those opportunities, those pathways, so that they can get to those gateways in those institutions.
It's really by not finding them, you're doing two things, right? One is first, as I always tell everybody when I talk about like these kinds of issues about recruiting talent, is that like I don't want to take like the middle talented white dude when I know that they're they're like supremely talented in like all across. I want like the top of all of the experiences and races and demographics and all. But I just want the very best wherever I can find them. If you're saying you're not finding them and you're running an organization, you're making huge mistakes because you are you're by choice, by negligence or lack of imagination or lack of persistence, you are relegating your organization to to weaker talent. And and the ones who are making the extra effort to get the best talent are going to beat you. And that's usually the way it happens.
Right.
That's one way, like you're weakening your organization by not taking the extra effort. And secondly, you're not solving the problem either because you're not helping to increase those opportunities and to show models of success where really talented people are able to be examples for others in the community. Encourage them to go and chase these things because these are amazing opportunities. My son works in one of the big banks. It's an amazing opportunity. It's really tough, hard work. It's good, but the pay is good and the opportunity are great, and we should have more people fighting for those entities. Why don't we take one last break and come back and dive a little bit more into some other? I feel like we could do like 7 segments.
We really could.
Yeah, because there's just so much in the book. I'm like,
there's so much.
We only really talked about like 1.5 sections of the book. But let's come back after this break. You're listening to HPS Insights.
HPS is hiring full-time public affairs associates and analysts. We're seeking entry-level associates and analysts to join our dynamic team. Associates have immediate client exposure and opportunities for professional development while working in a fun, fast-paced, and challenging environment. Recent graduates or applicants with up to 3 years of postgraduate work experience are encouraged to apply. Learn more and apply today at hamiltonplacestrategies.com/careers.
Now we're back on HPS Insights. This is Tony Fratto. We're discussing the Black Agenda. It is a wonderful collection of essays on big public policy issues by Black experts, edited by my great friend Anna Gifty, Opoku-Agyeman. Anna, we were talking about, we talked about some of the areas, and I feel like we could do like 6 podcasts. Breaking down each.
It's a good idea, Tony.
Maybe we'll find a way over time. We definitely will. Yeah, we definitely will find a way to talk about more pieces. But what else did you learn from? Like, what did you learn as you were going through it and editing these works and these amazing experts?
100%. And I think it's so funny. The only pushback I got in for putting this book together is like, you're a grad student, you're in your first year. Why on earth would you do this, right? Like you're taking like the hardest classes you're going to be taking in your next 4 years or so. And I think for me, it's actually very complimentary, right? So I'm in a public policy program. I'm studying economics at Harvard Kennedy School. And this is sort of an epicenter for a lot of intersections of different studies and different policy areas that are of high sort of importance, and people are really interested in it. So being able to identify the very people I hope to cite as I'm going through my program has been one of the joys of my life. And then being able to I actually had to edit those essays, by the way. So it's not like, oh, you just submit your essay, we're good. I had to turn academic language into layman speak. I had to bring academic journal articles down to New York Times op-ed types of language. And that in and of itself was a skill that I was able to flex a little bit. And I think I did a pretty good job according to, those who were contributing to the book, as well as my co-editor on this, who was in the publishing house, Hannah McGrady. And so that being said, I learned quite a bit from it. The section that I think many people are going to learn a lot from is the criminal justice section. So I think a lot of us have had sort of a lot of different types of information about the criminal justice situation in America and, the context that sort of fuels it. But I think what I love about that section is that it just lays out the facts. Like there are just a lot of facts. I was putting together
sort of facts. Yeah, it's jam-packed with facts. Yeah.
Jam-packed with facts. And some of those facts are just numbers. And those numbers are staggering, right? And so one thing I like to mention here is that, for example, and this is actually in the climate chapter, but it alludes to the criminal justice chapter, there's about 589 federal and state prisons that sit next to a super dump, or Superfund dump, meaning that these are dump sites where environmentally toxic waste is abundant, right? So think about it. There's folks who are in prison right now who have to breathe, like the only air they can breathe is coming from, a waste dump right next to the facility. And so I think when you think about that, it just puts a lot of things in perspective. And then you go to the criminal justice chapter and they kind of have a couple solutions, some of which you may agree with or may not agree with, but they all tie into this fact of the fact of the matter is that Black and brown people are being disproportionately incarcerated. There needs to be another way to hold people accountable that doesn't dehumanize them while also put our planet in danger, right? And so I think that for me is something that I didn't really even know that there was a tie between the climate section and the criminal justice section, The other thing that I thought was really interesting was the wellness chapter. So in that chapter, we have an essay about mental health. One of my favorite essays in that chapter is actually from a friend of mine, Opoku-Agyeman Paul, who writes about the diary of a Black disabled woman. And I thought that was a really powerful essay.
Very powerful. It's clear. Seriously,
yes.
one of again, like
it's so good.
So
and
good.
It makes so much sense, right? But that actually ties to the Black Women Best essay, that Janelle Jones and Angela Hanks put together, which talks about, targeting policies at Black women as a way to move our country forward is actually a really, really good proxy for progress. And so when you look at Tinu's essay, in light of that, they're complementary, right? Tinu's saying, look, we got to construct workplace policies in light of people who are not just marginalized on the disabled spectrum, but they're also marginalized with respect to their race, gender, sexuality, and the like. And so I love that, none of these people talk to each other, but all of their essays kind of come together. And it kind of talks about, to like the bigger point, that Black experts are operating basically from the same context, right? They see the problem together as this one thing or a couple of different things. But ultimately, the solutions are where things differ slightly, but those solutions are oftentimes complementary. And so it's not enough just to do one of the solutions, but it's also important to do one of those solutions in light of another. And so for me, that's sort of how I've learned quite a bit from the individuals in this book.
Absolutely. The two things based on what you just said too, in fact, I made notes on them when I was reading through. Was one is that when you said you may or may not agree or disagree with the recommendations on civil justice reform. It's like you can say this about the whole book, right? Like
yes.
The book is presented with like lots of ideas, first observations and facts and context and recommendations, any of which you may, except for the facts and especially the data,
right.
that you should accept, but that you can have different views on it. Like it is a very thought-provoking book that you may or may not agree or disagree. What you will get though is an understanding of the perspective of where the communities that are impacted, of how they see and think about these things. The second observation that you just hit on also is just the interconnectedness of so many of these things. And I was, you kind of know that, if zip code is, is fate, right? Like where you live, like, so we were talking about climate.
That was Dr. Marshall Shepard's.
Disproportionate. Yeah. Because, white people moved out into certain communities, Black people moved in, those communities tended to be closer to water, right? And where they end up being susceptible to whether it's hurricanes or other kinds of then because they're connected, economic opportunities were not provided in those communities. There were things like redlining on insurance and housing finance and the resources available for education. So now we're talking about education in those communities. So all of these things, like there is so much interconnected on all of them. And I think it is great that you capture so many of them in one read. Like you can just read through this and see all of these connections and networks that you may not have thought about before.
Yeah, 100%. I absolutely agree with that. For example, as you mentioned, Dr. Marshall Shepard's essay talks about redlining and talks about how zip code really matters in terms of even the kind of temperatures you're experiencing within your given neighborhood and how that's directly tied to your wealth ability and whether or not you have generational wealth. And then you go to the public policy chapter where Cliff Albright, who is very well known as one of the co-founders of Black Voters Matter, talks about how those same issues are also tied to voting, right? Yep. And so it's like you're seeing kind of the interconnectedness, and that's kind of the point, right? It's more so, I would say, a Black agenda because we don't have all the different perspectives, but it does a really, really great job of covering a broad spectrum of ideas that you then find kind of fit like puzzle pieces with one another. And it's like, oh, wait, if we, deal with this redlining issue or we deal with this, disinvestment issue, that actually impacts voting rights. And if we, deal with voting rights, that impacts, the kinds that kids get to go to, et cetera. One of my favorite essays in the entire, I think it is my favorite essay. I'm not supposed to have a favorite. I do. In the entire book is by Dr. Lauren Mims. She is a psychologist, but she also was one of the, she was part of the Obama administration's initiative to promote African-American excellence in education. And so she wrote an essay about how she administered a program with Black girls Some of them came from different types of circumstances. And every time I read it, I cry. Like literally every time I read it, I cry. Because what she kind of depicts right there is how a lot of these structural issues are internalized and then projected. And she kind of uses that as a backdrop for why she advocates for Black girls being sort of a proxy for progress in the classroom. A lot of times, Black folks, especially younger Black folks, have to deal with different types of trauma that's impacted by structural factors. And so those structural factors are ultimately outlined in this book, but you'll see in the education chapter in particular, it is impacting people, right? It's like impacting real people and people at a very young age. And it's really, really important that these structural factors be administered or addressed in a way that really, at the end of the day, centers the humanity of Black people. That's ultimately what the Black agenda is aiming to do. It is making a case for the humanity of Black people.
Well, I think it goes just a long, long way in accomplishing and achieving that. And it's a terrific read. I recommend it to everyone. I appreciate you being able to come on and spend time with us to talk about it. I'm so excited about the book being released. As a reminder, you can find it on all of your digital book outlets.
Yes.
I'm not going to pick favorites on them, but they're all there, and you should. I recommend everyone who's interested in these issues should really just go get it. It's called The Black Experience. Anna Gifty, thanks so much for spending time with us today, and you will be back. So
yes, I will. It is also Black History Month, so
it is.
Be sure to support a Black bookstore if you can.
That's a great point. I'm so glad you got that pitch in. Absolutely. Support Black bookstores in your community. Get out and find them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Insights podcast, produced by Hamilton Place Strategies. For the latest updates, follow us on Twitter at HPS Insights and follow us on the web at hamiltonplacestrategies.com.